33% of all the political accounts which Elon Musk interacts with on X are run by people who are ethnically Jewish. That is, of every retweet, reply, and quote tweet to these accounts, a full third of them are run by Jewish individuals, who make up only 2% of the US population and 0.2% of the world population. This video will be an examination of that fact, as well as a presentation of the data that I have gathered in order to conclude it. If you want to look at the data for yourself, there will be a link to a spreadsheet in the video description, which I encourage you all to check out. Before we begin, I'd like to address, or readdress for those of you who have seen my past videos on this matter, the question of motivation. Why look into who Elon Musk is interacting with on X? Some of you watching will have already recoiled and mentally predetermined that this video is anti-Semitic. For those people, I would ask you to examine where that reflex is coming from. In this video, I'm doing nothing but presenting a fact and giving you the data to back it up. This instinct to shut people down for simply broaching a topic in good faith, which you are afraid of, is nothing but cowardice. I encourage you all to take this video as an opportunity to discuss a topic which, although recently has been entering into the public consciousness more and more, historically has been strictly verboten. Now for a breakdown of how this data was gathered and a more detailed discussion of the data. If you don't really care about the minutia and you want to skip over the boring stuff, then please jump ahead to the discussion section of this video. First, on the how. In order to get all of Musk's tweets, the official X API was used, only grabbing tweets which were replies, so no original posts from Musk because we're only interested in who he was interacting with. I hit one limitation right away, in that Musk recently changed the old Twitter API to severely limit its abilities. Notably, it only allows you to pull the most recent 3,200 tweets from an individual. And since Elon apparently uses X all day, every day, these 3,200 tweets only account for his activities starting in early January. Future studies on this matter would obviously be greatly improved if more tweets can be pulled. So if anyone knows how this can be accomplished, please let me know. I think everyone watching would be interested to know if and how Musk's behavior changed after his vacation with Ben Shapiro. After all the tweets were gathered, I examined the accounts Musk was responding to and put each into one of the following categories. Politics, economics, that's things like stock traders as well as Tesla investors, which Musk likes to retweet pretty often. Businessmen, scientists, the celebrity/entertainer/influencer category, technologists, people like engineers as well as AI commentators, and other, which was a small category for mostly personal accounts, people who post what they're doing that day. After this, the accounts were categorized by ethnicity. Now, this couldn't actually be done for a lot of these accounts because they were either one, business or organizational accounts, in which case ethnicity wasn't applicable and they were marked as NA, or anonymous accounts, run by one person, but we don't know who. And these accounts were simply marked as anonymous. All of the interactions Musk had with these accounts are still in the spreadsheet, but obviously they weren't included for the purpose of calculating racial representation. As an aside, I know that a lot of people will leave comments on this video and say something like, actually such and such an account is run by a Jewish person, and then they'll look at the spreadsheet and they'll see that that person is marked as anonymous or white. I need to note that, number one, if the individual is not attempting to remain anonymous online, yet they've never published really any information about their ethnicity, I don't really make much of an attempt to dig up dirt on them and potentially dox them. So unless these people are obviously dark-skinned, they will in all likelihood be marked as white. This means that it's almost certainly the case that many Jewish individuals are marked as white in my spreadsheet, meaning that any estimates I give in this video are actually low-end floor estimates, which I think actually helps the case I'm trying to make overall. Point number two. If the person running the account is attempting to remain anonymous, I will always mark them as anonymous. For an example, many people think that the X account End Wokeness is run by a Jewish individual, and they have their reasons for thinking that. But I will never jeopardize someone's anonymity if they want to keep it. And I certainly won't speculate on things that we can't be sure of, so he has to be marked anonymous, even though Elon Musk interacted with this particular account 76 times in the period that we're examining. Now moving on to results. Looking at just the tweets coming from accounts for which ethnic information is available, we see that 25% of them are from Jewish people. And if we look at only tweets coming from political accounts, then this bumps it up to 33% as stated at the beginning of the video. What's more, if you further limit that pool by only looking at accounts above a certain follower account, then the percentage of Jewish individuals continues to trend upwards. First, only accounts above 1,000 followers, then 10,000, 50,000, and so on. I think this is relevant because Musk seems to make a point to interact with accounts with very few followers, if only one time. Since these accounts are quite small, there's very little information on who runs them. So for most, I just had to assume these people were white if they had light skin. By the time you get up to only accounts with 200,000 followers or more, a full 38% of them are run by Jewish individuals. As just another way to look at this data, if we look at the top 50 most frequently retweeted accounts, we see that 32% of them are Jewish, so very close to the percentage for total tweet count. Alright, so clearly any way you slice the data, Jews are overrepresented at around 15 to 16 times the rate we should expect. Of course, the question on everyone's mind will be this: Why is it the case that Jews are overrepresented on platforms like X? Well, if it really was just X, then perhaps we could chalk this up to an anomaly, nothing to get worked up about. But for any of you who've seen my past videos on Jewish overrepresentation, we know that this phenomenon isn't limited to just X. I've shown that Jewish individuals are super abundantly overrepresented as guests on podcasts like Joe Rogan's, Lex Friedman's, Sam Harris's, and Tim Pool's. Additionally, while I have not done standalone videos on these subjects, I've also done several dozen other studies looking at popular podcasts and mainstream shows, including The Tim Ferriss Show, The David Pakman Show, Ben Shapiro's Sunday Special, the Huberman Lab podcast, and Eric Weinstein's The Portal podcast, just to name a few, among which Jewish individuals make up 28.5, 29.7, 31.5, 34.9, and 40% of the guests, respectively. Spreadsheets with all of the guest data for each of these podcasts are also available in the video description for you to review at your leisure. So it isn't just X. It seems that on a multitude of popular media platforms, Jewish voices are heard 10 to 20 times more often than their population should account for. Usually they're represented at rates equivalent to or very near to that of white people. That is, despite whites being something like 25 times more numerous in the country, a roughly equivalent number of Jews and whites make it on these shows as guests. So it's not just who Elon Musk is interacting with on X, it's a much more widespread phenomenon. But we still haven't answered the why. Let's see if we can shed some light on that question. A common way people will try to explain the state of affairs is by demonstrating that there exist imbalances in racial representation in many walks of life, with perhaps the most obvious example being the NBA. And it is the case that blacks are around 6 times overrepresented among NBA players, making up 73% of the league, despite being only 13% of the US population. Now, the exact reason for this isn't known for a hard fact, but most people would probably agree it has to do with cultural differences between blacks and non-blacks, and if you're willing to be a bit more controversial, probably has something to do with physiological differences as well. So if this is all well and good, nobody really seems to have too much of a problem with this explanation, could a similar type of logic be used to explain Jewish overrepresentation? Could there be something inherent to Jewish culture or Jewish people which makes them 10 to 20 times better than everyone else in the media? Some people will point to this idea that Jews have a higher than average IQ in order to explain it. I'm skeptical of that for several reasons. Please see my video debunking higher than average Jewish IQ for more detail. And if you don't feel like going down that rabbit hole, know that even if you do think Jews are smarter, their supposed IQ advantage wouldn't come close to explaining how overrepresented they are. See this paper by Kevin McDonald, which soundly deals with that issue. So if it's not a physiological difference, maybe there's something inherent to their culture which makes them particularly well suited to careers in media. While this claim would be difficult to prove since it deals with the non-definite area of sociology, I think it might be possible to disprove. You see, in order to get to the bottom of this, in addition to looking at all of Elon Musk's tweets and all of those other podcasts, I also looked at a list of around 1,000 of the top creators on YouTube, according to a list on Wikipedia, and examined who on that list was Jewish. That spreadsheet, by the way, also available in the video description. If there was something inherent to Jewish culture which made them great in the media, then we would expect Jewish individuals to dominate YouTube. But what do we find? Only 4% of those creators are Jewish, a figure much more in line with their population, and one which can, I think, be adequately explained by mundane factors like having a more urban population, for example. So what causes this discrepancy? 4% on YouTube versus 40% or sometimes more on some of the world's most popular mainstream shows. Well, I can't say for sure. Again, I don't want to speculate too much in these videos. But I will note that I think it's kind of odd when you have a meritocratic platform like YouTube, where anybody can make a channel and succeed, Jews don't seem to enjoy the same advantage they do in shows where the guests are hand-chosen from a small pool of select individuals. In furtherance of this study, I plan on expanding this list to include far more YouTubers in the future, and to look at other areas of the media that might be studied. But for the time being, I think this is sufficient, and it was good to rely on the Wikipedia list because it took that decision-making process of who to include or exclude from the list out of my hands, so nobody can accuse me of cherry-picking. In any case, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm happy to simply put this data out in the world and not speculate on it too much myself, in the hopes that it will facilitate a good conversation around a topic that I think desperately needs to be discussed. It would and should have been discussed years ago were it not for the gatekeepers, largely conservatives but also liberals who would slander anybody who tried to broach this topic, even in good faith. To that end, Mr. Musk, if you feel like discussing this topic with anyone in detail, feel free to reach out to me and it can be arranged.